What is poppin', y'all? It is your man, Cloudboy Bales. Welcome to another episode of Wisco Sports, where we today are going to be talking about disappointing teams that did not make the playoffs. Obviously, this is my top 10 list on who didn't make the playoffs. Obviously, a lot of teams very much were disappointing. And I'm obviously going to be quick because obviously there's a lot of teams that didn't make the postseason, that made the postseason especially last year or the year before. And it's been nothing but disappointing for these teams. And honestly, I don't know what else to say. But it's crazy. Almost all these teams last year were in the postseason. So it's crazy how things can change after a year. Injuries, COVID, quarterback relationships. It's just interesting on how things work. And obviously, I'm going to be going over my list. As I said before, all the teams that made this list did not make the postseason. So obviously, here is my top 10 list. Alright, starting with number 10, we got the Chicago Bears. Now, this was a team that made the postseason as the 7th seed, only to get beat by the New Orleans Saints. But it was a downhill offseason for the Bears. They were signed Andy Dalton and got rid of Mitchell Trubisky. They also ended up getting rid of a lot of people because obviously they are on the cusp of a rebuild, and this season basically proved that. They drafted Justin Fields and got rid of their first-round pick, and you know, it's just been hard for Bears fans because this is a team that made the postseason in 2018 with Matt Nagy, and then the double doink happened, and then the next 3 seasons have been nothing but disappointing. And I don't know whose fault it is. Is it Nagy's fault? Is it the general manager's fault? But the Bears were poised to be very good, but they just came up short. And that's just something that you really can't see. Especially this year was very disappointing for them as they, they started out winning some more games down the road, but it just sucked to see the Bears, really struggle. Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, their GM and coach, have gotten fired, so obviously they're looking at a rebuild, and obviously it is the future of Justin Fields to see how he produces as a quarterback down the line. So obviously that's who I got at number 10. Number 9, we have the Washington football team. Last year they won the division because, let's just be real, the NFC East was the absolute worst division we've probably ever seen. Every team was under 500. Nobody could do anything. But Washington ended up winning the division because they had one of the best poised young defenses in the league. Jonathan Allen, Chase Young. They had some guys in, Montez Sweat. They had some guys in there that were going to be huge key playmakers that could really... And the pressure, obviously, is what everyone thought Washington could be a threat. And obviously, they are on the cusp of having a good offense because Taylor McLaurin is slowly emerging as a great wide receiver. Antonio Gibson, another great running back that's kind of coming up. Obviously, Taylor Heineke may be XFL or whatever he is, but he is slowly emerging to become better. However, I don't believe he is the answer. And obviously, this was the truth because Washington, their offense did struggle, but however, their defense that was super good and poised had lots of injuries and got absolutely worse as the season went on. And it was just a very disappointing season for the Washington football team. I wanted to see more, but we did not get to see that from Washington. At the number 8 spot, we got the New Orleans Saints. Now, after a Week 1 unbelievable game against the Packers where they blow out the Packers and the whole sports world reacts, saying Jameis is the guy for the Saints actually were starting to look like a really good, solid team. And honestly, I think they would have made the postseason. But honestly, it's very disappointing, obviously, that they couldn't make the playoffs, but there was really no fault in that. The Saints have one of the best defenses in the league, and if I'll be honest, they have the best defense in the league this year. There was no question whatsoever about that. However, the Saints' offense was absolutely horrid. Injuries left and right, and obviously the ACL tear for Jameis Winston is really what costed the season. Taysom Hill and Trevor Siemian are just average quarterbacks that really can't get your team any wins. The only guy on your offense that can really do much production is Alvin Kamara. And as we know, we want to see more from him in the future because he's a great back. But Jameis, he appears to be the guy for the future. It's just an unfortunate blow. They were one win away or a loss away from making the playoffs, but I don't think they would have done much in the playoffs against whoever they had to end up playing. So, anyways, it just sucks it sucks for the Saints because they've missed the playoffs, but I believe if they get themselves turned around, they should be in the playoffs next year. At the number 7 spot, we have the Minnesota Vikings. This is one of the teams that, as a Packers fan, really scared me because this is a top 5 offense. Dalvin Cook's a phenomenal running back. Justin Jefferson is probably in my top 5 for wide receivers. Adam Thielen, also another great wide receiver. And if you think about it, Kirk Cousins was putting up MVP numbers. The problem was he didn't have a defense that could support him. This Vikings defense is the reason why Minnesota lost as many games as they did. Their defense was absolutely horrid. And they have an offense that can really complement, with any teams, which is why when you look at all these games against really good teams were close. They even, they should have beat the Cardinals back at the beginning of the season. But a missed field goal cost that. They had some very good solid wins, but their defense has been absolutely horrid, which is why it's very disappointing. That's why Zimmer ended up being fired this season, and also their GM, Pelissero, I think his name is, or something like that. But the thing is, I want the Vikings to be successful because this is an offense that really should be in the playoffs, and really teams should absolutely be scared of. Their defense just is awful, and it just really sucked for Vikings fans this year. And obviously the season coming down to Sean Mannion in the end because Kirk Cousins got COVID. But as I know, I just really want to be able to see, more from the Vikings in the future. All right, the number 6 spot goes to the Miami Dolphins. This was a team that was one win away from making the playoffs. Unfortunately, they completely got swacked in the face by Buffalo, who already clinched the division and the spot, so this game was just kind of stupid for them. But Miami, this was a team that really did fight, but this was a team that made absolutely no sense to me. This team started winning the first game of the season, then losing the next 7, then winning the next 7, and then losing the next one to get eliminated from the playoffs, and winning the final game against a team who already clinched. This was just the weirdest season ever. And even so, they fired their coach, who has honestly, he's a very good coach in Brian Flores. So this team makes absolutely no sense to me. They ended the season going 9-8, and it's crazy because no one would have ever thought when you were 1-7, you'd end the season 9-8, which is crazy. The first team to ever have a 7-game winning and losing streak in the same season. Pretty insane. The Dolphins just come up short once again. I don't believe it's Brian Flores' fault. Who knows if it's Tua's fault? Because he hasn't been spectacular, but, he's a young guy, and I think he'll develop over time. But this was just another disappointing season for the Miami Dolphins, and I really hope they find a replacement for Flores that's better than Flores, because I think Flores was the guy, and they're making an absolute mistake by firing him. All right, the number 5 spot. A lot of people say that they should be higher, but there really wasn't anything I could say. Number 5, I got the Seattle Seahawks. This is a team who I really, their division was the Rams, Cardinals, and 49ers who all made the playoffs. Seattle lost Russell Wilson for a big chunk of the season, and Geno Smith had to step in at QB. Even with Wilson or without Wilson, they didn't have a team that could really get them down the field. Now, later on, we started to see Russell Wilson really get back on his feet and start to look like himself. And honestly, if that was the case, I think they would have actually won more games. But the Seattle defense, even though they've shown some signs and flashes of brilliance, they just could not really get many things done. I wanted to see more from them, but the problem was their division was just too good this year. And honestly, this might be the end of Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll and the Legion of, and everything in Seattle that they have accomplished for the last decade. This is the first time they've missed the postseason since 2011. It's been 10 years. It's pretty crazy, but Seattle fans have a lot to be thankful for if this is it for Russell Wilson. But it was a very disappointing season for Seattle, but I predicted it in the beginning. The number 4 team was the team that just got eliminated, the last team to get eliminated from the postseason, the Los Angeles Chargers. This was a team that everybody thought was going to be really good. An emerging defense. Joey Bosa, Derwin James, great people on there, and their defense is just going to get better and better each year. Justin Herbert, the rookie of the year last year, led the league in rookies for passing touchdowns, broke these records. He is doing the same stuff, and he has a talented offense. The problem is with the Chargers, they just seem to choke in these situations. The Chargers, I felt like, should have won more games than they really should have. And it was just very disappointing to see the Chargers choke on many opportunities, including losing an easy win to the Houston Texans out of all teams. And then finally, when they could have got into the playoffs, they decide to take a tie. The Raiders take it to the advantage and eliminate them from the playoffs by converting for the first down and getting the game-winning field goal. This was just an embarrassment for the Chargers. And honestly, they should have got in the playoffs, but they really screwed themselves over. And I really think that they need some more work. Obviously, this is a team I could see in the playoffs down the line, but this was just very disappointing because everyone expected the Chargers to be legitimate contenders and obviously contending with Kansas City. We already saw them win against them once this season. They really could have done it again, but the Chargers are going to get better and better, and I believe Justin Herbert will get better as a player. Next up, the number 3 team that was disappointing was the Indianapolis Colts. Now, normally I'd have them lower, but this was a team that started the season out terribly, but then they ended up starting winning games. Now, this is a team I don't believe anybody wanted in the playoffs. Even though I'm a huge Wisconsin fan and a huge supporter of Jonathan Taylor, he was the offense. Everybody else was not really a key player. Jonathan Taylor was the team. And honestly, I don't think really anybody wants to see a one-man team in the playoffs. Even though their defense has shown some flashes, obviously Darius Leonard is a great linebacker and a great player, but the problem is Carson Wentz is not going to lead your team into the playoffs. And the Colts were lucky enough to lose to a 2-14 Jacksonville team on the road while their fans were wearing clown costumes to mock their franchise. I don't think there is really anything else I can say, but I'm kind of glad that they did not get in. Because let's be real, the Colts, I don't think, would have survived. They had their chances, but this is a team that never would have lasted. The number 2 spot, this one should not be a real surprise to anybody, but it is the Baltimore Ravens. Now, of course, Baltimore started the season out as a playoff contender because Lamar Jackson was one of the best players, and obviously they have done so much damage in the division for the last 2 seasons. The Ravens, unfortunately, missed out on a lot of Lamar Jackson due to getting COVID and an ankle sprain that really kept him out. Tyler Huntley had to get a lot of the damage. They also lost at the very start of their season their top 3 running backs, as well as their number 1 corner and their number 2 corner also later in the season. This season was just riddled with injuries and COVID for the Baltimore Ravens, and it was just very disappointing. And even if they would have somehow won these games that they needed to win, like for example not going for the 2-point conversion and just going for the tie, they could have actually won these games and gotten to the playoffs. It is very possible, but even if that was the case, Baltimore would never have survived in the playoffs because this team was just too injured to begin with, and it was just a very disappointing season, but they should be in the playoffs next year, especially Mark Andrews having the season that he had. He deserves, obviously, to get into the playoffs. And then finally, the number 1 team that I think was very much the most very disappointing team this year has got to be the Cleveland Browns. Baker Mayfield had honestly the worst season I've ever seen out of a quarterback in my life. I don't know what happened to Cleveland, but this was a team that was going to get good. But the problem was Baker Mayfield was a bust. And I think everybody realized it. This is a team that their defense was going to be emergent. You got Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney pass rushing you. You got a defense that's going to get better and better as it comes. You got a good you got the best running back duo in the nation with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And don't forget about Dearness Johnson, too. Their tight ends, also great. Jarvis Landry, also a great wide receiver, and some young wide receivers as well. Obviously, the reason why their team shifted from being really good to really bad was the drama with Odell Beckham Jr. And obviously, when he spoke out and left the team on his own because of how much he did not like Baker Mayfield, it really threw everything off on the team. Plus, with the COVID issues, this team just could not do anything, and realistically, even if they got into the playoffs, Baker Mayfield could not do anything. And honestly, when I saw him throw the ball, I cringed knowing that he was going to throw a pick. This was just a terrible season for the Browns. And honestly, I really hope that they figure themselves out. So anyways, those are my top 10 most disappointing teams of this season. So if you like what you saw, subscribe below, comment with your thoughts, share, and do whatever. And as always, it's Man Cowboy Bales. Stay tuned for more updates. Stay safe, be smart, go Pack Go. We will see you next time.